The umbrella didn't match the sky, it improved it. Fire engine red hanging from a thrift store hook in Capitol Hill, Seattle, with a luggage tag that had no address, only 4 printed rules and a tiny QR code. The rules were simple: borrow during rain, log your storm, leave a kindness, move it on within a week. Tessa bought nothing else that day and didn't exactly buy the umbrella. The clerk waved it off like a community potluck dish, already paid for by someone who loved weather and strangers. Outside, rain stitched the sidewalks into one continuous sentence. Tessa flipped the canopy open, watched the street sharpen, and felt a click inside that had nothing to do with ribs and ferrules. On the inside spoke, someone had written a start line in silver marker. Red Umbrella Exchange. Begun in Portland. The winter the buses forgot mercy. The QR code opened a ledger that behaved like a guest book and a map. A timeline of storms rolled down the screen. Boise sleet that bit like gossip. San Francisco mist that arrived with the mind of a cat. A Chicago tantrum that taught parked cars humility. Each entry held 3 parts. Where the rain found you, what you kept dry, what you left behind. People left bus tokens, pocket packets of tissues, $2 coffee credits, a folded list of late-night shelters, a tiny bag of dog treats for someone's soaked spaniel. The umbrella had become an errand machine for days that needed a nudge. Tessa worked in community arts, which meant she knew how to make a budget do push-ups and a lobby behave like a living room. She added her storm, Pike Street at noon, a grant draft under her jacket, and left a kindness that fit inside the tag sleeve, a transit day pass, and a handwritten map of the best awnings near her bus stop. She carried the umbrella for 3 commutes, then walked it to a little free library in Ballard, and parted ways without ceremony, the way you let a kindness keep moving. 4 days later, the ledger pinged from Portland. A photo showed the same red dome at a crosswalk on Alberta Street, the caption listing what had been rescued: a stack of paper menus, a phone in a back pocket, a haircut that refused to frizz, and what had been left: a roll of blue painter's tape to seal damp packages, 2 butterscotch candies from a bartender who believed in morale. The signature at the bottom wasn't a name, just an initial with personality, N, in a line that sounded like a promise. If this keeps circling the coast, I'll keep circling with it. The ledger wasn't built for conversation, but it developed one. Tessa began checking it like weather itself. The umbrella crossed to San Francisco with an apology to the Bay from a Midwesterner who had laughed at its fog until the hill taught him better. It leapt to Sacramento with a kindergartner's drawing of a cloud taped to the handle. It paused in Reno at a bus depot and acquired a neon zip tie like a friendship bracelet. Then the storm maps went quiet for 11 days. The silence felt familiar, the way people drop out of group texts when life gets expensive. On day 12, the umbrella reappeared in Denver under snow that looked like someone had broken a million plates politely. The entry belonged to N again. Block letters, a habit of leaning harder on verbs. He had rescued a roll of set plans in transit to a theater shop and left a pair of hand warmers and the address of a public library with heat and patience. The final line said something like a thesis. Some weather arrives uninvited. We can decide not to let it make the rules. Tessa's own weather shifted. The arts nonprofit trimmed hours the way you trim bangs and regret it for a month. Her closest friend moved to Minneapolis with a poet and an open invitation. The apartment upstairs adopted a drum set and invented new hours to practice. In that hollow where noise can't help, she started behaving like a steward for something that didn't belong to her. She checked the ledger for cities that sounded tired and wrote tiny add-ons in the comments. Where to find a public restroom that wasn't war, which buses came often enough to deserve the title. The laundromat with the good machines on the left side, even though the right ones looked newer. The umbrella came back to Seattle on a February weekend that wore gray like a uniform. N brought it north with a photo of an empty stage and said only that the show had closed and the crew had wrapped under a leak that shouldn't have had that name. Tessa walked to a farmer's market with a thermos of coffee and a fresh roll of quarters and left the umbrella in sight near a sign that said the city would forgive rain until noon. By evening, the ledger recorded a rescue, an elderly man with a paper bag of persimmons and a kindness, 2 bus transfers and a handwritten recipe for soup that could be scaled for 1. She didn't expect to meet N. The exchange was designed to be bigger than any 2 people, Still, the handwriting raised its hand again a month later from Los Angeles. The photo framing the red canopy like a carnival tent over a sidewalk vendor's cart. The caption listed new rules written on a strip of duct tape inside the tag. Leave light. Leave useful. Leave places better than you found them. The entry ended with a testable hypothesis. If we add a line for music, storms shrink faster. The following day, people started leaving song titles in a tiny playlist. Someone in Santa Barbara added a lullaby. A paramedic in Phoenix left the title of a track that tricks a pulse down from panic. Tessa added one too, an instrumentals only number that had gotten her through 3 grant deadlines, 2 migraines, and a stubborn goodbye. The playlist felt like a room with the lights low and the door propped open. The umbrella began to carry spare earbud covers taped under the strap. Every new kindness changed the kit a little, the way a handprint changes dough. A librarian in Boise laminated the rules. A kid in Oakland tied a reflective ribbon on the handle so the thing could be seen at dusk. A woman in Chicago left a single-serve poncho with a note that it wasn't much but would do the job once with dignity. The ledger became a census of small heroics. Kept a letter dry long enough to mail it. Saved a sign-up sheet for a blood drive. Protected a dog while the Thunder auditioned for a role it didn't get. Then betrayal stepped onto the page with the confidence of a person who believes in their own reasonableness. The umbrella disappeared from a Sacramento cafe, and 2 days later an online marketplace listed it as a vintage novelty with an inflated price and the tag blurred out. The comments in the ledger went bright and unhelpful for a breath. Outrage rarely survives its own wind, but steadied under the architect print of N. He proposed a rebuild, not a hunt. One umbrella could be stolen, a network could not. They set a date. The first Saturday in April, public libraries across 5 cities. People brought thrifted red umbrellas and luggage tags, painter's tape and Sharpies, rolls of quarters and small maps. A bus driver in Portland donated a stack of all-day passes. A Chicago theater left a box of hand warmers. A Seattle coffee shop offered 5 rain credits taped inside tag sleeves. They printed the rules on cardstock and decided on a gentler name. The red umbrella ledger would refer to the ledger, not the object, as if to remind everyone that the point wasn't the canopy, but the community under it. Tessa's branch held its gathering under a skylight that pretended to be weather. She watched strangers tune a system into existence, the way people agreed on left-of-counter space for umbrellas to drip, the way someone standardized the length of tag strings so they wouldn't tangle, the way a teenager suggested using a QR that linked to a plain web page with low drama and high clarity. N did not appear in person, but the left-leaning letters did, on a printout with a quiet addendum. If the ledger gets too loud, let the umbrellas do the talking. Some romance announces itself like brass. This one arrived like a pattern you only recognize in hindsight. Tessa began to notice N's handiwork in other places. An unwedding fundraiser at a community center featured folding chairs arranged with improbable grace. A note with the same lean-on verbs sat on the back of a borrowed toolbox. A pop-up repair clinic under the Ballard Bridge, fixed zippers and sharpened knives and somehow moods. The sign-in sheet had the same patient block print. She circled those calendar squares not as a detective, but as someone enjoying an artist's show before learning the name beside the work. They finally occupied the same room by coincidence that felt earned. A cloudburst near Pike Place snapped half-open umbrellas like flags. The red one hung from a hook by a bulletin board under a flyer for a mutual aid pantry. Tessa had stopped to trade a handful of hand warmers for a bag of socks from a cardboard box labeled "free if you're cold." A theater tech, wet at the edges and careful with everything, checked the ledger with the trained speed of someone who knows how to cue a scene change. He had the tidy hands and the pencil over the ear. He had the posture of a person who knew how to carry weight without making anyone else feel heavier. He had a rolled plan tube under one arm and sawdust clinging to the cuffs like an accidental signature. Neither of them broke the ledger's no-names etiquette aloud. They helped 2 tourists reroute around a puddle that had ambitions. They retied the umbrella's reflective ribbon. They slipped spare tissues into the tag sleeve and added 2 songs to the low-light playlist, one that forgave Tuesdays and one that made Thursday afternoons honest. In the ledger, two entries appeared minutes apart with the same observation. When strangers coordinate, weather downgrades itself. After that, overlaps started to look less like accidents. N's entries kept teaching the ledger how to be useful without turning into a sermon. Tessa kept dropping micromaps and notes wherever a kindness could stand in for instructions. She learned his calendar the way you learn a city by walking it. Load-ins on odd hours, strikes that smelled like lemon cleaner and relief, gigs that sent him to Portland, then Santa Fe, then back in time to build a door that would slam perfectly once a night on cue. He learned hers without asking. Board meetings that needed translation between art and numbers, afternoon programs where teenagers smuggled in brilliance and only needed microphones that worked. The ledger digitized into a scatter of sister pages maintained by no one and everyone. The umbrellas multiplied like a good rumor. Some carried a tiny pocket of earplugs for stadium weather. Some carried quarters taped 2 by 2 for washers that still ate coins. All carried the rules, tuned for clarity. Borrow during rain. Log your storm. Leave a kindness. Move it on within a week. The entries read like a choir that knew when to leave space. Philadelphia. Cab driver pulled to the curb and waited. No horn. Houston. A stranger kept my blueprint dry and didn't comment on my panic. Missoula. Left-hand warmers found a note about the best shortcut to warmth that wasn't a bar. Tessa's ex tried to reappear as math, a share of a deposit for a weekend he'd scheduled with someone else, labeled as fairness. She forwarded the email to a folder named Compost and talked to the one audience that didn't require her to perform. Rain on a rooftop and a ledger that made sense. She wrote a task for herself and didn't pretend it was neutral. Stand in the doorway of an old room and choose not to go back. The umbrella did not judge. It simply recorded a storm past and a kindness left, laminated directions to the closest place that would print a document without asking too many questions. The ending, like most weather, refused to be final. It preferred pattern to fireworks. A June afternoon in Astoria learned how to be clear just long enough for a tiny festival no one had budgeted for. A blanket on grass, a jar where people wrote down tasks finished this week, called my mother, didn't send the text, left my seat open, replaced what I borrowed, thanked the building. Teenagers ran cables like quiet professionals. A man with sawdust still in his cuffs showed up with folding chairs because folding chairs are love letters written in aluminum. He and Tessa checked the ledger at the same moment and added the same rule at the bottom in two hands that already knew how to take turns. First Sundays, 4:30 p.m. If you're within rain distance, show up. If not, send something that fits in a tag sleeve. They didn't pose for a photo. They stood under a sky with no opinion and agreed, without saying it aloud, on a schedule instead of a script. First Sundays, wherever weather believed in itself. Leave light. Leave useful. Leave places better than you found them. By autumn, the umbrellas had more scratches than shine, the way good tools do. The ledgers kept reading like invitations more than diaries. New Orleans. Protected a sax, left a song. Tucson. Used for sun, left sunscreen and a list of cold rooms. Boston. The librarian said keep it until it ends, whatever that means. When storms stalled, people invented tasks. Change a light bulb and pretend it's a sunrise. Write your neighbor's name the way they spell it. Thank a stairwell for the legwork. When storms got mean, the ledger expanded its perimeter. QR codes to hotlines, tiny cards for shelter addresses that folded into wallets, links to playlists with songs that turned noise into air. Some stories act like centerpieces in speeches. This one holds with errands and patience, and the ordinary bravery of showing up without a script. If a red umbrella with a ledger tag finds you, in Seattle or Savannah, in a laundromat in Queens or a bus stop in Boise, borrow it, log your storm. Leave a kindness that fits in a sleeve. Move it on within a week. And if the sky decides to be kind one afternoon, stand in a doorway that used to own you and choose a different room. Weather obeys rules more often than it admits. So do hearts, given a system worth trusting.